So, as everyone and their mama who's involved in Thomas and Friends knows, the Railway series is full of iconic characters created by Wilbert Audrey. I mean, come on. Thomas, Edward, Gordon, Henry, James, Toby, Duck, Duke, the Coldefell engines, the list goes on. But there's also two other weirdly memorable characters that have gotten a lot of favoritism from the fandom. Two characters that, well, didn't really do a lot in the Railway series at all, but have still stuck in the minds of various readers worldwide. And those characters are Jinty and Pug. Yes, I'm being for real. Let's talk about them real quick. One of the most popular books in the Railway series lineup is the 12th book, The 8 Famous Engines. One particular reason is with the book's last story, The Fat Controller's Engines. As we all know, in the beginning of the story, due to the main 8 of Sir Topham's engines taking a little vacay to London after they received letters of people saying WTF to engines with faces, other engines from the mainland are sent over to Sodor to take over the work while they're gone. 2 of these faraway engines are seen in this illustration of the story. It is said while Thomas is showing one of them the coaches, he starts to boast and brag about his race with Bertie, which leads to him crashing and making a fool of himself. Probably and arguably this is the part of the book that a lot of readers glance at the most, aside from Percy's plunge during their first reading. What was glanced over, though, is the engine who pulls Thomas back onto the rails after he embarrasses himself. What was also glanced over is the 2 engines themselves puffing through the station here as Percy greets them. I say was because in the 50s when this book was published, I'm pretty sure the readers briefly validated Jinty and Pug while reading, but then soon forgot about them after reading the final part of the book with the engines in London and then moving on to the next book later on. However, in the following years after, a lot of fans started to give more notice and appreciation towards these 2 characters, and understandably so. Which is why I want to make this video, as I too want to give them some more attention, cause, honey, Jinty and Pug ain't got no business appearing this little in the books, and there's a little bit more to them than meets the eye. In other words, despite having only 2 visual appearances and no dialogue whatsoever, Jinty and Pug are actually the GOATs, and are honestly worthy of the later growth in popularity. I want to examine into why that is. One of the things I feel that makes Jinty and Pug more acknowledged is their personalities. These 2 are tank engines and look like they can form a pretty good bond with Thomas and Percy. I mean, hell, they do kind of resemble one another in shape, with Thomas and Jinty's boxy tanks and Percy and Pug with their saddle tanks. As I said before, we do see within the text that Thomas and Jinty are already paired up together practicing with some coaches, where Thomas is already sparking up some convo with Jinty. It's mostly him boasting, of course, but you get it. I think what we should point out about this, though, is Jinty's face in this picture. This is where I'm going when I say that their personas have had them receive attention from fans and readers. Like, look at this scenario, dude. Thomas is just sitting there looking stupid with his damaged buffers, and Jinty is literally guffawing and laughing his ass off at him. The wide mouth, the scrunched eyes, this dude is in hysterics. That's what I mean when I say that Jinty low-key shares Thomas's cheekiness and playfulness in behavior just by looking at this one illustration. Like, could you imagine that after the engines got back from London, Thomas sees Jinty and wants payback for him laughing at him, and so it leads to a plot of how him and Jinty play tricks on one another with trucks or something until they get even? I don't know. With this probable characterization of Jinty and us all knowing how Thomas is, it just seemed like it would be an interesting take. Also, I could totally see Jinty teasing and playing prankster with the bigger engines if he ever filled in as a station pilot or something. Like, judging by this one face alone from him here, I can see all of that cheeky likeness going on for him. As for Pug, I feel like he would be cheeky like Jinty, yes, but also have more of a chipper, energetic persona to him as well. Like, he would treat the other engines nicely, but say if an engine was to keep downplaying on him, he would ignore it at first, but if it gets out of line, then he would hatch a plan or something. I don't know, something along that nature. Also, yes, you have tons of other characters that could fit that description, but to me, it could feel a tad little bit different with Pug because he is the younger of the 2, and yet the more level-headed and doesn't have as much of a strong, cheeky nature to him like Jinty. I mean, if you have a different idea of how Pug would be characterized, that's fine. But to me, when I look at him in this illustration or a pic of his basis, that's how I would see him. Also, I can see him and Percy in a good story together, considering Percy is pretty familiar with him and Jinty. They may be looked at as minor characters, but just slap a good personality going for them, and they'll be 2 that can be really relatable and enjoyable to look at. Hell, many fans have already done this with them in custom stories they've written, and it's definitely put them in the spotlight more. I'll talk more about that later, though. Speaking of stories, anyone else think that these two had potential to appear or at least cameo in more Railway series stories? I do. Except, well, with that one would have to be a little careful with the timeline that the stories take place in, because unfortunately, in real events, both Jinty and Pug's classes were being withdrawn and scrapped starting in 63 and 64. So let's say that after the 8 famous engines, which takes place in 1956, either of them could be seen in the background of stories in Duck and the Diesel Engine or the Twin Engines, which take place in 1957 and 1959, respectively. And by that, I mean in an illustration of volunteering in the yard or something, I don't know. I was going to say it would be cool if they gotten one more mention by Percy in Branchline Engines, but I understand that book was busy into setting up the upcoming saga with Thomas's accident and Daisy, so I won't say that. It would feel a bit bittersweet if they were seen one more time after 8 famous engines, though, considering it would have been getting closer to that time of the early 60s and they wouldn't be around much longer after that. I just wish they could have been more remembered just a tad bit more by Wilbert at that point before their sad ending. Although, while all of that would have been the case for Pug, seeing how he and all of his siblings were scrapped around 1963, it would be a little different for Jinty. Let me explain more. Some years ago, Thomas YouTuber Sodor Island Models made a video going into detail about which real-life engine Jinty could be and concluded that he was most likely number 47287 and was scrapped with the rest of the class. Really good video, by the way. Go check it out. However, let's say that in an alternate reality, Jinty may be one of the 9 out of his class that was preserved and are still around today. While Sodor Island Models does bring a good point about which engine Jinty could be and his possible fate of being scrapped, on the Thomas Wiki it says that out of the 9 preserved, 2 of these engines are from the original batches of 3F060s without the tank holes, which could lead one to believe that Jinty is one of these 2. If that was the case, then let's say what if Jinty appeared in Christopher's later books that take place in the 80s and 90s? Like maybe there was a story where he came back to Thomas's branch or even maybe went to help out on the Little Western after the workload was too much or something. I mean, it's more than likely these 2 of the 9 engines were still running around that time, so hell, why don't we say that Jinty, one of the 2 original 3Fs, was called back to Sodor to help out and reunites with Thomas and Percy again. Again, there could be a Jinty versus Thomas story, or a story of him meeting Daisy or Mavis, or him meeting other characters elsewhere entirely with Duck and Oliver. Would have been a cool little story batch in the Christopher lineup, don't you think? Now, this is all just a big old fan-made what if, okay, y'all? I'm aware that it's more than likely that Jinty isn't one of these 9 and was probably most likely scrapped like Sodor Island Models said. But still, when you think about it, it could have supported to have a very minor character like him get some more attention in the books. Because, like I said, both he and Pug have no business being seen so little, yet have possibility to be so interesting. Like, Jinty and Pug could also be featured in Chris's books in a flashback illustration or so, like Albert. I like to agree with a lot of others who made the headcanon that Jinty, or number 47287, was brought to Sodor after withdrawal in 64, where they worked happily as a station pilot or regular shunter. I'm gonna leave talk of picturing them being in the TV series alone because it was more reasonable for the showmakers to use already established characters like Oliver, Mavis, both sets of twins, and Boko for the adaptation, as there would have been no point why they would have to go through hell and high water to have any Gauge 1 models of Jinty and Pug for their small roles. As for nowadays, though, with Train Simulator, 3D modeling, etc., the possibilities of these 2 appearing in Thomas Media are endless, as many fan projects with them throughout YouTube show. Just for the record, I want to go ahead and shout out some of my favorite videos featuring Jinty and or Pug. These include Jinty's Twin Trouble by I Love Trains 323, To Be an Engine by LWP, The Lost Pug by Train Studios, No Laughing Matter by NWR 1991, Pirate, recently posted this year by Ringo Rongo, and Forethought by Siramai. Siramai especially has made some very entertaining content featuring Jinty and a custom character named Brad. His videos about them are so hilarious and well written. Check them out. The fandom has really allowed these 2 blink and you'll miss them characters to have quite the reputation in the Thomas world, taking into account of thought up new identities for them and starring them in some pretty unique and creative stories, interacting with other characters, whether they be the main characters, Railway series only, or even TV series only. There are some very nice Jinty and Pug stories out there that are worth checking out. In conclusion, it's such a shame they got brief of roles in the Railway series, because when pushed into the spotlight more, they're both actually a lot more than just their cameos in 8 famous engines. Like, granted, there are lots of other small minor characters in the Railway series, but Jinty and Pug are two that got a bit more about them than the rest. I mean, at least we got their names. That's something, right? Other than that, though, I'm happy with how they were treated by Perception afterwards. Whether they're given selfhoods, fleshed out contributions in stories, or all around just more recognition to their overall existence in the Sodora universe, Jinty and Pug are definitely two figures I feel deserve the huge love. Are Jinty and Pug two of your minor Railway series favorites? What other minor character in either the Railway series or TV series you feel deserves more attention? Sound off down in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. More videos on the way, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.